My name is Rachel Mitchell, and I'm 38 years old. I work as a high school teacher in New York City, a job that keeps me both challenged and inspired. I've been married to my wonderful husband David for 10 years, and together we have two amazing kids, Lily, who's 9, and Noah, who's 6. And just a few months ago, something life-altering happened, correct? Yes, exactly. It was about 3 months ago when I had what doctors call a near-death experience. It was nothing short of miraculous, truly the most profound and transformative moment of my life. Can you take us back to that moment? What happened? It was a quiet Tuesday evening. I had just finished my shift at the school and was eagerly heading home, looking forward to dinner with my family. The last thing I remember is stopping at a red light just a mile from our house. And then, everything changed. What followed was a blur. According to the police report and witnesses, a drunk driver ran the red light at full speed and slammed into the driver's side of my car. The impact was devastating. My car was completely totaled, and I was trapped, unconscious and bleeding. What do you remember after that? The next thing I knew, I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating, weightless, free from pain. It was as if I had been lifted from the wreckage. Below me, I could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles and paramedics frantically trying to pull me from the twisted metal. But instead of fear, I felt an overwhelming peace, almost as though I was watching the scene from a distance, untouched. Then, I saw something incredible. Above me was a warm, glowing light, the brightest and most inviting light I had ever seen. It was calling to me, drawing me in like I was meant to go home. What happened when you moved toward that light? As I got closer to the light, something indescribable happened. I was engulfed by a love so pure and so deep that it overwhelmed every part of me. It was the kind of love I had never experienced on earth, pure, unconditional, and all-encompassing. And then, I saw him. Him? Yes, Jesus. Standing right there, waiting for me with open arms. His presence was so vivid, so real, it felt like I was seeing him face to face for the very first time. His smile was so warm, so compassionate, it melted away everything I thought I knew about love. In that moment, I felt completely known, completely loved. Nothing about me, not my flaws or mistakes, mattered. I was home. What happened next? Jesus spoke to me. His voice was gentle, but it carried such authority, such peace. He said, "My beloved child, I have so much to show you. Come and see what I've prepared for you and for all who trust in me." And then he took my hand, and suddenly we were soaring through the most breathtaking landscapes I could have ever imagined. We passed through clouds that shimmered like gold and silver. I saw mountains so majestic, they took my breath away, valleys filled with flowers, in colors I didn't even know existed. There were rivers as clear as crystal, and waterfalls that seemed to glow with a light all their own. What was it like? It was more beautiful than any dream, paradise beyond anything I could have ever imagined. But as stunning as that natural beauty was, what came next was even more incredible. We arrived at a city like nothing I'd ever seen before. Can you describe it for us? It was immense, so vast and perfect in every detail. The city was laid out in a perfect square, its high walls made of jasper gleaming like polished glass. 12 gates, each one made from a single enormous pearl, lined the city. The streets? They were paved with pure gold, but not just any gold. It was transparent, like crystal. The foundations of the city were adorned with every precious stone you could imagine. Sapphires, emeralds, topaz, amethysts, stones that I couldn't even name. It was breathtaking. Is this what's described in the book of Revelation? Yes, it's exactly like the New Jerusalem. A place beyond comprehension. A home prepared for those who trust in Him. And in that moment, I knew it was my true home too. Is that what you were seeing? Yes, exactly. Jesus confirmed to me that what I was witnessing was the holy city, the New Jerusalem, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. He explained that this city is the eternal dwelling place He's preparing for all who belong to Him. What else did you notice about the city? The most striking thing was the light. Everything around me was bathed in this radiant golden glow. But there was no sun, no artificial lights, just the pure glory of God Himself, shining brightly, casting no shadows. It was as if darkness simply couldn't exist there. The light was warm, inviting, and filled every corner. Did you go inside the city? Yes, we did. Jesus led me through one of the magnificent pearly gates, and as soon as I stepped inside, I was overwhelmed by the grandeur and beauty that surrounded me. The first thing I noticed was a wide boulevard running through the heart of the city. It was like a main street, but far more glorious than anything I could have ever imagined. What did you see along this street? In the center of the boulevard, there was a crystal clear river, flowing with the most serene grace you could imagine. Jesus told me that this river was the river of the water of life. On either side of the river were the most beautiful trees I've ever seen. Trees that bore 12 kinds of fruit. These were the trees of life, and their leaves, Jesus said, were for the healing of the nations. Everything I saw aligned so perfectly with the descriptions in the Bible. What else did Jesus show you? He took me to a place He called the Father's house. At first, I thought I was looking at a palace, but calling it just house didn't do it justice. It was an enormous, majestic structure that stretched far into the distance, as far as my eyes could see. Can you describe it? The architecture was beyond anything I could comprehend. It was a blend of familiar and otherworldly, all at once. There were soaring towers and grand courtyards, with countless rooms and halls. The walls were made of the most precious materials, gold, platinum, crystal, and rare gems. But the most surprising thing wasn't the grandeur. It was the warmth, the inviting feel of the place. It wasn't cold or ostentatious. It felt like home. Jesus mentioned that He had something prepared for you. Did He elaborate on that? Yes, He did. He led me down a long corridor, lined with countless doors on either side. Then He stopped in front of one door, placed His hand on it, and said, "This is for you." When He opened it, I couldn't believe what I saw. What did you see? It was the most breathtaking room I could have ever imagined. Or perhaps sweet is a better word. Everything in it was perfectly tailored to who I was, my tastes, my personality, the colors, the furnishings, even the artwork. It all felt intimately familiar, yet so much more beautiful than anything I could have created myself. It was beyond what I ever thought possible. Did Jesus explain the purpose of these rooms? Yes, He did. He told me that in His Father's house there are many dwelling places, and that He has gone to prepare a place for each of His followers. These rooms are eternal homes, places where we will live in perfect communion with God and with each other. Did you notice anything unique about your room? Yes, there were several things that stood out. One of the most amazing things was a painting on the wall. It depicted moments from my life. times when I had shown love and kindness to others. Jesus explained that these were treasures I had stored up in heaven through my actions on earth. What else did you notice? There was a bookshelf filled with journals. When I looked closer, I realized they were filled with the prayers and conversations I'd had with God throughout my life. Jesus told me that every word spoken in faith, every conversation with the Father, is precious and preserved. It sounds like every detail was deeply personal and meaningful. Absolutely. There was even a display case with what looked like medals or trophies. Jesus explained that these represented rewards for faithfulness and obedience in different areas of my life. He emphasized that while all believers are equally loved and welcomed in heaven, there are different degrees of reward based on how we live on earth. Did Jesus show you anything else in the Father's house? Yes, he did. He took me to a vast hall, one that he called the banquet room. It was enormous, and at its center, there was a table that seemed to stretch on forever. Jesus explained that this is where all of God's children would gather to feast together in perfect fellowship for eternity. It was an image of unity and love, something truly beautiful. Did you encounter any other people during your experience? I did. As I walked through the city, I saw countless people, more than I could ever count. They came from every nation, tribe, and language, just as the Bible describes. Every one of them was filled with joy, peace, and worshiping God in perfect community with one another. Did you recognize anyone? Yes. I saw my grandmother, who had passed away when I was just a teenager. She looked so young and vibrant, full of life. I also saw a dear friend from college who died in a car accident. They both embraced me with so much love and excitement, telling me how happy they were that I would join them someday. But that it wasn't my time yet. Did Jesus explain why you were being shown all of this? He did. He told me he was giving me a glimpse of what awaits those who place their trust in him. He wanted me to share this hope with others, to let them know that there is so much more beyond this earthly life. Did Jesus say anything else to you specifically? Yes. He looked at me with such tenderness and said, "I am so proud of you. You have been faithful with what I've entrusted to you. Continue to love others and point them to me. Your reward in heaven will be great." How did you feel at that moment? I felt a joy and peace so deep that words can't do it justice. All my doubts, all my fears just melted away in his presence. I knew without a doubt that I was loved, that I had a purpose, and that the best was yet to come. It was like a profound transformation within me. How did it come to an end? Jesus looked at me, a gentle but firm gaze, and said, "It's not your time yet. You have more work to do for me on earth. Remember what you've seen and share it with others." Then he embraced me one more time, and suddenly I felt myself being pulled back to your body. Yes. The next thing I knew, I was aware of intense pain and bright lights. I could hear voices around me, filled with urgency. I had been in a coma for 3 days, and I was just beginning to regain consciousness in the ICU. Part of me didn't want to leave that incredible peace and joy, but at the same time, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and mission for my life here on earth. How has this experience changed you? In every possible way. I have a completely new perspective on life and death. I'm no longer afraid of dying. I know what awaits me on the other side. But I also appreciate the preciousness of each day we have here on earth so much more. Has it affected your faith? Absolutely. My faith has been strengthened beyond measure. It's one thing to believe in heaven and eternal life, but to have experienced even just a taste of it firsthand. I know without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus is real. His love for us is beyond comprehension, and He is preparing an amazing future for all who trust in Him. You mentioned New Jerusalem. Can you elaborate on the scale and grandeur of the city? Certainly. The sheer size of the city was beyond comprehension. Jesus explained that it was 1,400 miles in length, width, and height. A perfect cube. Try to imagine a city stretching from New York to Denver and then stretching that same distance straight up into the sky. It's almost impossible to grasp the scale. Did you get a sense of the layout or organization of the city? Yes, to some extent. Despite its enormous size, everything felt perfectly arranged and easy to navigate. There were beautiful parks and gardens scattered throughout. I saw magnificent buildings that seemed to be centers of learning, creativity, and worship. Everything was interconnected by shimmering golden streets. You mentioned earlier that there was no sun or moon. How was the city illuminated? The light came from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. It was as if the entire atmosphere was infused with this warm, golden radiance. Jesus explained that this was the glory of God Himself, lighting every corner of the city. There was no night, no darkness, just perpetual, perfect light. Did you notice any other unique features about the environment? Yes. One thing that stood out to me was the perfect temperature. It wasn't hot or cold, just pleasantly warm and comfortable. The air was so pure and invigorating to breathe. Everywhere I looked, everything felt alive, with God's presence in every leaf, every ripple in the water. Even the most still things seemed filled with His life. You mentioned seeing many people there. Can you tell us more about that? Yes, the city was filled with people, more than I could count. They came from every ethnic background, all ages, and everyone wore these beautiful, radiant white robes. Everyone looked so healthy and vibrant. There was no sickness, no aging, and no disabilities. Did you interact with any of these people besides your grandmother and friend? Yes, I did have brief interactions with several others. What struck me most was the overwhelming joy and love radiating from everyone. There was no fear, no suspicion, no awkwardness, just genuine delight in meeting and connecting with one another. Did you observe people engaged in any particular activities? Yes, I saw people engaging in all sorts of joyful activities. It was clear that there was a perfect balance between worship, community, and personal fulfillment. It felt like the ultimate harmony, a place of endless peace and fulfillment. There were groups gathered in what looked like study or discussion sessions, others creating beautiful works of art or music. I saw people tending to the gardens and parks, but everything was done with a sense of joyful purpose, not as work, but as a delightful expression of creativity and service. You mentioned music. What was the music of heaven like? Oh, it was indescribably beautiful. There was this constant undercurrent of music throughout the city, a heavenly symphony that never ended. I heard choirs singing in perfect harmony, instruments I've never heard before, and even what seemed like the very elements themselves joining in the melody. It was as if all of creation was offering up continuous praise to God. You mentioned earlier about rewards in heaven. Can you elaborate on what Jesus showed you regarding this? Yes, Jesus explained that while salvation is a free gift received by faith, there are rewards in heaven based on how we live our lives on earth. He showed me what looked like a ceremony where believers were receiving crowns and other honors from him. But interestingly, everyone who received these rewards immediately cast them back at Jesus' feet in worship, acknowledging that any good in them was because of him. Did Jesus give you any insights into what kinds of actions on earth lead to rewards in heaven? He did. He emphasized that it's not about grand public displays of piety, but rather the small, often unseen acts of love, kindness, and faithfulness. He showed me scenes of people being rewarded for things like patiently caring for a sick family member, quietly giving to those in need without recognition, and remaining faithful in prayer even when it seemed like nothing was happening. That's encouraging to hear that even small acts of obedience are noticed and rewarded. Did you learn anything about the concept of time in heaven? That's an interesting question. Time seemed to work differently there. It didn't feel linear like it does here on earth. There was no sense of rush or urgency, yet also no boredom or wasted moments. Jesus explained that in eternity, we'll have unlimited time to explore, learn, create, and grow in our relationship with God and with each other. You mentioned learning and growing. Does that mean we don't know everything instantly in heaven? No, we don't become all-knowing. Jesus showed me that heaven is a place of continuous discovery and wonder. There are libraries filled with knowledge to explore, new skills to learn, and endless depths of God's character to plumb. He said that for all eternity, we will be growing in our understanding of His love and the marvels of His creation. Did you get any sense of what day-to-day life is like for those in heaven? It's hard to describe in earthly terms because it's so different from what we experience here. There's a perfect balance of rest and activity, of individual pursuits and community engagement. I saw people enjoying rich relationships, engaging in stimulating conversations, and collaborating on creative projects. But underlying everything was this constant awareness of God's presence and a perpetual attitude of worship. Did Jesus show you anything about the new earth that the Bible mentions? Yes, He did. He took me to what He called the viewing room in the Father's house. It was like a massive observatory with windows looking out over the most spectacular landscapes I've ever seen. Jesus explained that this was the renewed earth, familiar in some ways, but perfected and freed from the effects of sin and decay. Can you describe what you saw of this new earth? It was breathtakingly beautiful. I saw vast, pristine forests, crystal clear lakes and rivers, majestic mountains, and lush valleys. The colors were more vivid than anything on our current earth. The animal kingdom was in perfect harmony. I saw lions lying down with lambs, just as Isaiah prophesied. There was no sign of pollution, decay, or death anywhere. Did Jesus say anything about our relationship to this new earth? He did. He explained that we would have the joy of exploring and stewarding this renewed creation. He hinted at adventures and discoveries beyond anything we can imagine now. But he emphasized that while the new earth will be amazing, our primary joy and focus will always be our relationship with God Himself. Now, I'm curious. Did Jesus show you or tell you anything about the judgment that the Bible speaks of? He did. And it was one of the more sobering parts of my experience. He showed me a great white throne with all of humanity gathered before it. I saw that every person's life was being reviewed. Every thought, word, and deed laid bare. For those who had put their faith in Christ, their sins were covered by His blood. But for those who had rejected Him, it was a terrifying scene of facing judgment without that covering. Did Jesus say anything about hell or eternal separation from God? Yes, and it was heartbreaking. He showed me a place of utter darkness and despair, completely cut off from God's presence. He explained that this was never his desire for anyone, but that he respects the free will he has given to humanity. Those who choose to reject his offer of salvation are ultimately choosing this separation. How did seeing this affect you? It gave me a much greater urgency to share the gospel with others. Seeing the reality of eternal separation from God made me realize how vital it is that people understand the choice they're making in this life. It's made me much bolder in talking about my faith and inviting others to know Jesus. Did you learn anything about the role of angels in heaven? Yes, I saw countless angels throughout my experience. They seemed to have various roles. Some were engaged in worship, others appeared to be messengers or guardians. Jesus explained that angels are created beings, distinct from humans, who serve God and play a role in carrying out his purposes, both in heaven and on earth. Did you have any direct interaction with angels? I did have a few brief interactions. They were incredibly beautiful and powerful beings, but also humble and completely focused on glorifying God. One angel told me about how they rejoice every time a sinner repents and turns to God. Now, I'm curious about something. Did you see or learn anything about how heaven relates to our prayers here on earth? Yes, that was one of the most amazing things Jesus showed me. There was this area he called the incense room. It was filled with these golden bowls. And Jesus explained that these bowls contained the prayers of God's people on earth. I could see them rising like incense before God's throne. It really emphasized how much God values and responds to our prayers. Did you gain any insights into how God answers prayers? Jesus showed me that every sincere prayer is heard and answered, though not always in the way we expect. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes no, and sometimes wait. But he assured me that God always responds out of his perfect love and wisdom, even when we can't understand it from our limited perspective. Now, you mentioned earlier about rooms or mansions prepared for believers. Can you tell us more about what you saw regarding these? Certainly. Jesus took me down this incredibly long corridor with countless doors. He explained that each door led to a personalized dwelling place for a believer. When he opened the door to my room, I was amazed at how perfectly it reflected my personality and the things that bring me joy. Can you describe your room in more detail? It was spacious and filled with light. The colors were my favorites, soft blues and greens. There was a cozy reading nook with shelves full of books. I saw a piano and other musical instruments, art supplies, and a telescope for stargazing. Everything I love was there, but perfected beyond anything I could imagine on earth. Did Jesus say anything about how these rooms are prepared? He explained that he knows each of us intimately and designs these spaces to perfectly reflect our unique personalities and the desires of our hearts. But he also said that the rooms grow and change as we grow in our relationship with him. They're not static spaces, but dynamic reflections of our ongoing journey with God. Did you see anyone else's room? Jesus did show me a few other rooms briefly. Each one was completely unique. One looked like a vast library, another like an artist's studio with the most amazing views. He explained that in heaven, we'll have the opportunity to pursue and develop all the gifts and interests he's given us, free from any limitations. Now, I'm curious, did Jesus show you or tell you anything about how events on earth look from heaven's perspective? Yes, he did. There was a place he called the Watchtower. From there, I could see events unfolding on Earth. What struck me was how different things looked from heaven's viewpoint. Things that seemed hugely important on Earth often appeared insignificant, while small acts of faith and love shone brightly. Did you gain any insights into how God views human history and current events? Jesus showed me that God is intricately involved in human affairs, working out his purposes even through events that seem chaotic or meaningless to us. He emphasized that God's ultimate plan is for redemption and restoration, and that every event on earth is moving towards that final goal. Did you learn anything about how believers on earth and those in heaven relate to each other? Yes. Jesus showed me that there's a strong connection between the church on earth and the saints in heaven. He called it the great cloud of witnesses, mentioned in Hebrews 12. I saw that those in heaven are aware of and interested in what's happening on earth, especially in the lives of believers. They cheer us on, so to speak, as we run our race of faith. Now, as we start to wrap up, I'm curious, did Jesus give you any specific messages or instructions to bring back to people on earth? He did. His main message was one of hope and urgency. He wants people to know that he loves them deeply and has prepared an amazing future for all who put their trust in him. But he also stressed the importance of being ready, of living each day with eternity in mind. Did he give you any specific warnings or things to watch out for? Yes, he warned about the danger of getting too caught up in the things of this world and losing sight of what truly matters. He emphasized the importance of staying connected to him through prayer and studying his word. He also cautioned against false teachers who distort the gospel message. How has it impacted your daily life? I find myself much more focused on what truly matters. Material things, career advancement, worldly success. None of that seems very important anymore compared to loving God and loving others. I'm much more intentional about sharing my faith and showing Christ's love to everyone I encounter. Have you experienced any skepticism when sharing your story? Of course. I understand that it sounds incredible, and I probably would have been skeptical myself before it happened to me. But I know what I experienced, and I feel compelled to share it regardless of what others might think. What would you say to someone who doubts the reality of your experience? I would encourage them to look at the evidence, not just my story, but the countless similar accounts from people all over the world who have had near-death experiences. While the details may vary, there are remarkable consistencies in what people report seeing and feeling. Speaking of consistency, how does your experience align with traditional Christian teachings about heaven? In many ways, it aligns very closely. The idea of Jesus preparing a place for us, the emphasis on love and relationship with God, the concept of eternity as active and purposeful. These are all found in Scripture, but I think my experience also expanded my understanding. For example, the idea of heaven as a place of continued growth and creativity isn't always emphasized in traditional teachings, but it's certainly consistent with the nature of God as revealed in the Bible. What would you say is the most important thing you learned from your experience? Without a doubt, it's the reality and depth of God's love for us. Everything I saw in heaven, the beauty, the joy, the perfect peace, it all flows from God's incredible love. And the amazing thing is, we don't have to wait until we die to experience that love. It's available to us right now, through a relationship with Jesus. I just want to emphasize how real and vivid it all was. This wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was more real than anything I've experienced in this physical life. And the love I felt, the all-encompassing, perfect love of Jesus, it's changed me forever. I want everyone to know that this love is available to them too. That's a beautiful message to end on. Anna, thank you so much for sharing your extraordinary experience with us. I'm sure it will give hope and encouragement to many. Thank you for allowing me to share. My prayer is that everyone who hears this will be inspired to seek a deeper relationship with Jesus and to live with eternity in mind. Heaven is real. It's more wonderful than we can imagine. And it's available to all who put their trust in Christ.